Last week, we discussed the time in history when Grover Cleveland was elected president, lost to Benjamin Harrison, his successor, and then came back and beat Benjamin Harrison and served a second term, making him the 22nd and 24th president of the United States. Almost exactly the situation we hope happens in 2024. Last week, we discussed Cleveland's first term and why he lost re-election. This week, I'd like to discuss what happened in Cleveland's second term. Today's Lunch Lloyd is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. We can't ignore a series of growing and ominous financial indications predicting a recession at the latter part of this year and into 2025. Cleveland came back and won the election of 1892, having lost the election of 1884. Starting in 1892, there was a huge recession and depression in the United States, particularly in the Farm Belt. Farmers found that they had to borrow the money to do their planting at very high interest rates. But when it came time to sell their crops, they couldn't get very much money for them at all. And their remedy was to demand inflation. Inflation always makes it easier for a debtor because they borrow expensive money and repay it with cheap money. And the particular proposal that was pushed at that time for inflation was to switch from gold to silver as the basis for currency. Under the gold standard, which had been enforced before, the U.S. had a very sound currency, but the result was it was very expensive for farmers who were in debt. So farmers proposed that the government use silver as well as gold as the basis for currency, and that they coined silver at a ratio of 16 to 1, gold at 16, silver at 1, which would make the currency very cheap and very easy to repay. But it would undermine the credibility of the US dollar and would really reduce our commercial viability internationally. Cleveland, who was a former governor of New York, even though he was a Democrat, did not side with the farmers on this, but instead pushed the idea of sound currency, saying he would not support inflation of any sort, and saying that we must not repay the debt with inflated dollars because that would ruin our credit rating. William Jennings Bryan, who was the Democratic candidate for president, gave a speech at the Democratic Convention of 1896, a very famous speech called the Cross of Gold speech, where he said to the delegates, "You shall not press down on labor's brow a crown of thorns, and you shall not crucify mankind on a cross of gold." And the Cross of Gold speech became the rallying cry for populists throughout the country in 1896. Wall Street and the Republicans nominated McKinley for president on a platform of sound money. The Democrats were swept up by Bryan's rhetoric, and they nominated William Jennings Bryan to oppose McKinley as the Democratic candidate. And the election sharply divided the country. The eastern states, the northeastern states, all sided with McKinley and voted for sound currency. The western and populist and southern states sided with Bryan and wanted cheap currency. And in many cases, this was the seminal election before the 20th century. Had Bryan won, the 20th century would not have turned out as it did, because the credit of the US would be undermined, and the kind of prosperity we enjoyed would not have been possible. But Cleveland and the sound money people won, and they reversed it and threw Cleveland out of office. And the result set up the prosperity and the growth of the 20th century. Thanks very much for watching. Today's Lunch Lloyd is sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. We can't ignore a series of growing and ominous financial indications predicting a recession at the latter part of this year and into 2025. Ray Dalio warns that gold is probably the best way to hedge against this. Who will win the election? Will it be secure? Will there be violence in the wake of it? And what policies will be pursued by the new administration? These are all huge risks and huge issues. And the best way to hedge yourself is to put your money in gold. There's an old saying that the darkest hour is right before the dawn. Well, I think the dawn may be a Trump victory. I think the darkest hour is the one we're going through right now. So pick up the phone and call the Patriot Gold Group. Thanks for watching. The Patriot Gold Group offers no fee for life IRAs to viewers of these videos. The IRA minimums are $25,000 and $100,000 for the no fee for life IRA. So call the Patriot Gold Group and ask for the no fee for life IRA.